said stuff without a scare.
This defense sucks. You are a professional team. Act like one, for God's sakes.
One of the greats. Buffone was a bear. He was a Chicago Bear. Now at the barroom for year 9, knowing winning is the bottom line. John Buffone continues the legacy. He's got Doug's pedigree.
If you look at this team and this quarterback and this coach, if it's not going to be now, when?
And John does it with 2 pros, Alyssa and Danny Shimon. Buffone, 55 years old bear, covering all the team's affairs. Buffone, 55 years old bear, covering all the team's affairs.
Hello and welcome to the 9th season of Buffone 55. I am your humble host, John Buffone, and I am so excited to be back here in the bar room. 9 years. Gee whiz, can you believe that? We started this show as a tribute to my Uncle Doug, and hopefully we do him proud, and we cover the Chicago Bears all season long. And if I can channel just an ounce of his energy, then I will be doing my job. So I hope that the 9th year of Buffone 55 is the most fun and the most informative, and the biggest way I can make that happen is by bringing back my longtime partner on the show. She's the managing editor of the NFL Wires at USA Today and Bears Wire, Alyssa Barbieri. Alyssa, welcome back. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so glad to be back because that means that football is finally here. It's been such a long off season, and especially after the way the season ended, beating the Packers, which we didn't get to come celebrate on the show.
Right.
So I was a little sad because that was my first one as part of the show. But I am just ready for the football season, and I'm just really happy to be back and talking Bears with you.
You know what? You've been on this show for so many years, and we never got to talk about a Packers win, and then we robbed that of you. I feel bad. So we can maybe talk about it today, but there's a lot of Packers news going out there in case no one knows. In case this is the first thing you're listening to today, there was some news in the NFL pertaining to the Green Bay Packers, but we'll get to that. Also, another way of making this show fun and informative is to bring back the Barroom's lead game and draft analyst, Danny Shimon. Danny, welcome back. Since the last time we talked, I hear you opened up your own YouTube channel. How you doing? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I missed you guys. I was no one to talk to, so I figured out get my own YouTube channel and start talking to people, and people start, hopefully watch and tune in and listen to what I got to jabber about. But yeah, I'm excited about setting up my YouTube channel, Shimon Draft Scout, and started off right before the draft and just gave some of the fans, our fans here, Barroom fans, an opportunity to see some of the guys that I was scouting, through the process, and guys that I would see as potential fits for Dennis Allen's defense, whether Ben Johnson's offense, so on and so forth. And, I think we had a great process there. And then after the draft, did a nice recap of some of the picks and all that stuff. But yeah, and moving forward, going into the season, it's always draft season. You guys always hear me say that, right? So I've already started previewing some of the positions of need that I can think of, as of right now, right? Going into this, things can change. It's a fluid thing. So, edge rusher, defensive tackle, so on and so forth. So some of the positions that I'm going to be previewing right now on Shimon Draft Scout. Hope you guys can subscribe and like and all that stuff. And during season, we'll put up some Bears game tape breakdowns there as well. And then obviously rolling into the postseason. The draft stuff, it'll ramp up again. So yeah, real excited about that, and obviously excited to be back here with you guys on another season of Buffone 55.
That's right. And we're going to talk about all those positions, and Danny's going to help break those down here in a little bit. And we do have a really good video produced by the Podfather, Aldo Gandia. But before we get to that, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the big news in the NFL today. Micah Parsons being traded from the Dallas Cowboys to the Green Bay Packers in exchange for 2 first-round picks and defensive lineman Kenny Clark. I was in rush hour traffic whenever this news hit, and I wanted to just accelerate through it. But I've taken some time to think about this and what it means. And so we'll go around the horn. And Alyssa, I'm going to start with you. What was your initial reaction when that hit that Micah Parsons will be wearing the green and yellow?
Well, the first thing I got the notification on my Apple Watch, I just saw like the 3 little sirens, and I'm like, oh God, it's Parsons. I'm like, just not Green Bay, not Green Bay. And of course, that's what happened. So I screamed like it was something, serious was happening to me, and just utter disbelief. We went into our Twitter chat, and I was like, Danny, you're gonna have to talk me off the ledge during the show because I'm freaking out. This is terrible. I thought that we were so close to Green Bay being back to mediocre. And I was like, man, they just, how did they do it? Yeah. I was stunned at first, but calmed down a little bit and thinking about why it could be bad. I mean, it's not all bad, but I mean, we'll see. Yeah. But initial reaction, just absolutely stunned.
Yeah. And Danny, listen, this is the most expensive way to acquire a person, to trade draft capital and then give them a massive contract, which if I have it written down correctly, it's 4 years, $188 million with $136 million guaranteed. So that is a very big contract. And also you're giving away a good defensive lineman and you're giving away 2 first-round picks. And so, and we've seen, listen, everyone's kind of talking about the Khalil Mack trade and how that didn't necessarily work out for the Bears. Now, the Packers are in better shape than the Bears were overall when they're acquiring Micah Parsons and the Bears were when they acquired Khalil Mack. But historically, when a defensive player is traded for 2 first-round picks, I think there's only been 3 up to this point, up until today. It would have been Jamal Adams, Khalil Mack, and Jalen Ramsey. I think only Ramsey is the one that really worked out. The Jamal Adams trade was terrible. Like that's low-key one of the worst trades in recent history. And obviously, Khalil Mack didn't bring a Super Bowl to Chicago, but he did have an impact right off the bat. And the Jalen Ramsey trade, they ended up winning a Super Bowl with the Rams. So that one kind of worked out. What's your take on this trade with Micah going to the Green Bay Packers?
Well, there was always talk about, if Jerry Jones and the Cowboys ever did, entertain trade offers, the Packers were one of the, many of teams. I think today Jerry Jones said there were 16 teams in total in front of the line trying to get him. And obviously from both sides, from the Cowboys side, I am shocked that they got so little in return, right? Because, you think, you have to kind of sit there and break it down. But I think the Bears gave up more for Mack than the Cowboys really gave up for, the Packers gave up for Micah Parsons. And Micah Parsons is a younger player. But I think Mack was a more of a dominant player, in my opinion, at that time the trade was made. But still, from the Cowboys end, I think they got hosed, if you will. Kenny Clark is a good player, was a 3-time Pro Bowler, but he's in a decline. Last year only had 1 sack. He's a good run stuffer, and that's what Jerry Jones was kind of touting today, was that run stuffing ability of Kenny Clark. And 2 first-round picks. If the Packers are as good as people think they are, there's going to be low first-round picks. So I think the Cowboys could have gotten. I thought the Cowboys could have done better. Now for the Packers side, and unless I know, and on our group chat, I said, relax. It's not that bad. Parsons is a great player. The guy will average about 10 to 12 sacks a season, no doubt about it. But some of the things that Jerry Jones brought up today, and some might say, all right, that's sour grapes. That's Jerry Jones kind of covering his butt. But it's true. You can run at Micah Parsons. He's a guy that get after the quarterback. So if the Packers get out in front and they have a lead, that defense can pin their ears back and get after the quarterback. That's where you're going to see Micah Parsons effect there on the Green Bay defense. But just to kind of take it back and say, all right, obviously everyone's now blowing it up. Packers are Super Bowl contenders. So the Packers will go as far as Jordan Love takes them. If Jordan Love is as inconsistent as he was the last couple of seasons in terms of turnovers and bad decisions in the red zone, even injuries to some extent, they're not going to be a Super Bowl contender, right? Parsons will get his 12, 15 sacks, but if Jordan Love isn't as good as the Packers think he is, they're still going to be, a team that's going to contend for a playoff spot, a wild card, maybe, contend for a division, crown in the NFC North. But they're not, to me, at least in my opinion, he doesn't make them a Super Bowl shoe in or a contender right away. I still think Detroit's better overall. I think the AFC is better in terms of KC, Baltimore, Buffalo, some of the other teams. So. I know there's an excitement in terms of getting a young, exciting player, dynamic player, but in my opinion, he's a one-trick pony at this point, and that's a great trick to have, right? It makes him $47 million a year, highest paid, non-quarterback in football. But it's something where like a lot of my buddies are texting me, it's like, oh, this FML, F my life, blah blah. I'm like, calm down, all right, it's not bad. We have a coach now, and Ben Johnson, that will scheme against. I think Ben Johnson, he's a different kind of cat, and we'll get into him later on. But he will take this as a challenge now, and I think you'll see him expose some of the weaknesses that Micah Parsons has. So let's just take a break. It makes the Packers an overall better unit, but they're not invincible, and in my opinion, they're not a Super Bowl contender. And for me, the biggest thing was the Cowboys got jobbed in this trade.
Yeah. And it's, to me, this obviously was not their first option, because if it were, they would have traded them prior to the draft, because what the Packers picked 18th this year, and so if they would have traded them prior to the draft, the Cowboys would have gotten a much better draft pick than what they're going to get next year with Micah. So I think that this was kind of a last resort kind of thing, and they kind of shipped them off. And man, if you live in Dallas, you lost Luka Doncic and Micah Parsons in the same year. That's gotta be rough.
That's rough. They did get the kid from Duke, the basketball player.
Yeah.
There you go. They got him. So
2 generational talents just leave your town in a matter of a few months. That ain't great. But that's we're not here to talk about Dallas. We're not even here really to talk about Green Bay. But we had to talk about that trade because it was the biggest story in the NFL, and it will have some sort of impact on the Chicago Bears. But we have a lot of Bears stuff to talk about. But before we pick up the latest news with them, the Barroom's podfather, Aldo Gandia, put together this look back on the team's offseason.
Good snap. Good hold. The kick on the way by Santos, and it is good!
After Cairo Santos kicked the Bears into victory in their final game of last season, the Bears then kicked off the start of one of the most transformative off seasons in franchise history.
I think we're at 18 right now. 18 candidates, if I'm not mistaken.
After an exhaustive search for a new head coach, the team hired Ben Johnson one day after the Lions lost their playoff game.
It is an honor to stand before everyone today as the head coach of the Chicago Bears.
Former offensive coordinator's arrival signaled a new era focused squarely on developing quarterback Caleb Williams, and his first move was to assemble a rock-star coaching staff to execute that vision.
And if we do that, the wins are going to come.
The front office followed suit with a blitz of roster moves. General Manager Ryan Poles prioritized the trenches, completely overhauling the interior offensive line. They traded for All-Pro guard Joe Thuney and former Pro Bowl guard Jonah Jackson. Later, Poles signed free agent center Drew Dahlman, securing a new starting trio up front.
The vision is to have a unit that's always on the same page.
But Poles wasn't finished. In the 2025 NFL Draft, armed with multiple premium picks, he continued to add explosive playmakers and fortify the lines.
Ready to be a Chicago Bear?
Let's go, Coach. Come on.
With the 10th overall pick, the Bears snagged Michigan tight end Colston Loveland, a dynamic receiving weapon who gives Johnson another major piece to move around the field alongside Cole Kmet.
The Chicago Bears select Luther Burden III, wide receiver, Missouri.
In the second round, a phenomenal value pick and Missouri receiver Luther Burden III fell into their lap, giving Williams a yak machine in the slot. They continued to strengthen the trenches on day 2 with offensive tackle Ozzie Trapillo and Texas A&M defensive tackle Shamara Turner. On the defensive side, the additions were just as significant. Veteran defensive tackle Grady Jarrett and end Dayo Odebengo were brought in to bolster the defensive line and add pass rushing depth alongside Montez Sweat. They, along with second-round pick Shamar Turner, give defensive coordinator Dennis Allen the aggressive, versatile pieces he needs.
It's a privilege to be on this defense.
The most significant storyline of all is the development of Caleb Williams. With an elite coaching staff, a revamped offensive line, and an influx of weapons like Rome Odunze, Loveland, Burden, and others, expectations are sky high. Question is no longer whether the Bears are building around him, but just how high he can elevate this talented new roster. Aldo Gandia for Buffone 55.
Well, we may be in early season form, but Aldo Gandia is not. He is in mid-season form, bringing the heat on these videos. We appreciate each and every one of those because they are done to the highest degree of class. So we appreciate that video and a great overview of the offseason. So let's jump into some Chicago Bears football talk. And Alyssa, I'm going to start with you from one of the most basic questions I can ask. How big was it for the Bears to go out and get Ben Johnson, not just from a Caleb Williams standpoint, but from a team standpoint? Because there were plenty of fans that were thinking, "Oh man, they're going to Bears this up. They're going to think let's be the smartest people in the room and go get Mark Trestman, or let's go get like who this and this and this and that. We're going to bring in Matt Eberflus." And so this is one of the first ones that I can remember in recent history that really got me excited. I wasn't overly excited about John Fox. I wasn't overly excited about Mark Trestman. I wasn't overly excited about Matt Eberflus. I guess I was moderately excited about Matt Nagy before I got to know him as a coach, I guess. So what does this do for you as far as the Bears as an organization, as a team?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just an absolute huge move for this organization. It's hard to quantify with words just how big of a move this was. This was the move, like you said, John, that was almost too good to be true for the Bears, because I think we almost expected it not to happen, especially when like those reports were coming out about the Raiders closing in on him, because the Bears aren't the franchise that goes out and hires the right guy for the job, like you were saying. And I know that Ben Johnson hasn't coached a regular season game yet, but he was the top guy in this coaching cycle and last coaching cycle, actually, and for a good reason. His resume really does speak for itself and what he did with the Lions over there. And like you're talking about, Ben Johnson isn't Mark Trestman. They didn't pass on Bruce Arians here. They actually landed the Bruce Arians. They got it right. And if this doesn't work, I think it's time that the organization looks elsewhere, because, it's not going to be the head coach. I think obviously the most significant impact of the Ben Johnson hire is getting someone who can develop Caleb Williams into a franchise quarterback, because that's something that this team hasn't had truly in decades. We saw last season, amid just the absolute chaos that was his rookie season, what Caleb was capable of, despite that putrid coaching staff that should not have been out there. They had no idea what the hell they were doing, and he still had an impressive rookie season, despite what the media will try to tell you. Throwing for over 3,500 yards, 20 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and he somehow, this is probably the most impressive part, was that he escaped unscathed after getting sacked a league high 68 times. So now that you get Johnson in that room to build Williams from the ground up, I think it has the potential to be very special. But we have to temper expectations here. It's not going to be immediate. It's going to take some time. But I think that even compared with what we saw from Caleb last season with that coaching staff, year one under Ben Johnson, I think we'll see substantial growth there. And, Ben Johnson's not just in charge of the offense here. I think what's most important is that Johnson comes from an organization that did what the Bears want to do. They went from worst to first, and he was a huge part of that transformation. He knows how to turn it around. He observed Dan Campbell and how he ran that team, delegated responsibilities. And, Johnson talked about how beneficial it was for him when he was in the coaching cycle the previous year, and how he wanted to come to Chicago then until they retained Matt Eberflus. But he talked about how important it was for him to return, because he didn't think he was ready to be a head coach. But now that he is getting that extra year of experience there, and he's talked a lot about the importance of that head coach GM alignment and helping to right the ship. And he saw that with Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell in Detroit. And that's why Ryan Poles got that contract extension this offseason when he probably didn't deserve it. But I mean, Johnson chose to align himself with Poles to turn things around in Chicago. And my God, Bears fans hope that he gets it done.
Absolutely. And Danny, before I pivot to you, I just want to put Aldo, go ahead and put up Maddie's comment back there again. Man, BJ must have Green Bay worried because they rarely make moves like they did today. Matty, we appreciate you putting some money into your comment there. But obviously, I think you're right, because Green Bay's not known for going out and spending big on free agents. They're not known for going out and making big trades, taking big swings. So maybe. Or they're thinking it's now the window's open. It's now or never. So for that team, I don't know. I'm not in their head. I don't want to be in their head. But that's a good point. They don't really make that. They don't really make those kind of moves too often. But Danny, we're talking about Ben Johnson. How can he and how will he hopefully transform this offense, not just from a schematic point of view, but from maybe a philosophical point of view? We saw things very disjointed, not just last year, but for the better part of our lives. We've seen disjointed offenses where people aren't on the same page, discipline problems, false starts. Obviously, the schematic's not working out. How can he transform this offense to something that we may have seen in Detroit?
Well, first of all, he'll modernize the Bears offense, right? He'll come in, he'll bring the scheme that he has with him, when he utilizes multiple sets, multiple formations, and makes things look the same in multiple different ways, right? So, John, you've been Alyssa as well, and Aldo, you guys heard me a couple years now. I'm saying you need to dedicate, to the run game. You need to be able to go ahead and at least the threat of the run to set the play action, to give your quarterback some easy completions over that second level of defense. And I think that's something Ben Johnson is dedicated to. That's something we saw a lot in Detroit, where that run game, everything predicated off his run game. Their sets will have three receiver sets, and with the one back in the backfield, and you can't tell if he's running the ball or if he's passing it, because he's done it from either way. He's passed and he's ran it from both formations. Even bringing in a 12 personnel, one running back, two tight ends. You'll think, oh, this is going to be a run. Nope, he goes in, he sets a pass play out of it. So that's the thing. He keeps the defenses on their toes. He has a great way in terms of play calling and being able to set up another play later on in the game. So this is something that Bears haven't had here. And I know when Johnson was hired, I was like, oh, everybody was talking about Matt Nagy as well. Well, Nagy was never the primary play caller in KC. And all Nagy did was he came here and he brought Andy Reid's, offense. And what Johnson is doing is Johnson is actually building the offense from scratch. He said it from day one. We're going to cut it down to the studs and we're going to build it up. And to the fact where he's even, cutting down in terms of what Caleb Williams does structure-wise, in a huddle, from his feet, from the ground up, and rebuilding that guy as well. So I think this is going to be a whole different type of offense that we're going to see here. Now, it is a lot of plays. It's a lot of different, verbiage. It's a lot of different formations, and things could be sloppy here in the first, 3 or 4 weeks of the season. So I don't want any of the fans to get upset or lose hope. This is something that and Johnson has said it recently. This is a team where I offensively, I expect them to get better as the season goes on, and they'll be playing their best football probably late in the season, December and January. So that's why I look forward to it, and just seeing the innovation that he brings. And I'm not even talking about the trick plays and all the flea flickers and all that. I'm talking about just basic setting up, being aggressive at the line of scrimmage, establishing the rushing attack, and then utilizing play action with Caleb under center to be able to kind of, get the defense on their heels, and now hit them with big chunks, and then adding those weapons on the outside with the Bird and obviously Roma Dunze, and then also the tight ends with Colson Loveland and Cole Kmet. I think that is something that he's going to take advantage of, again, as the season goes on.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's switch sides of the ball, because the defense is a very interesting animal right now with the personnel they have and some of the injuries they have. Alyssa, for some of the Bears fans who may not be familiar with Dennis Allen, despite the fact he was a head coach at one point, what do you know about him? What can you tell us?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most impressive things, so far from Ben Johnson is this coaching staff that he's assembled, because you have like those young rising talents and you have experienced veterans like Dennis Allen, and I think that this could end up being one of the biggest offseason moves outside of hiring Ben Johnson, because of Allen's experience as a defensive coordinator. That'll give Ben Johnson, the opportunity to just kind of hand over the defense to Allen while he runs the offense. And I think that one of the most important aspects of the Allen hire is that he has previous head coaching experience. And that's a huge asset for a first-time head coach like Johnson. And as he's making the transition to head coach, we've seen him during the preseason, and he's been solid. I think already better than Matt Eberflus. But, he's going to have his ups and downs as the regular season unfolds. And it's going to be important, I think, to have an experienced coach like Allen for him to lean on. And, Allen did struggle as a head coach on 2 separate occasions. And, but he has had success as a defensive coordinator. And in 4 of his last 5 seasons, Allen's defenses in New Orleans have been top 10 in scoring. And from 2018 to 24, Allen's defenses have ranked 5th best in defensive EPA per play. And just kind of looking at what we've seen from this defense so far this summer, we've seen those early flashes of the violence and aggression that he really wants to instill in this defense, to the point where the Miami Dolphins started fighting each other because they were so frustrated. So I really think you're starting to see the players buy into his defense. Now there are some personnel issues and some injuries, which I'm sure that we're going to get to, but I think that the overall hiring of Dennis Allen could end up being a really important, one of the most important offseason additions that the Bears made.
Yeah, because you think about Dennis Allen has been a head coach. And so if Ben Johnson is learning something new, you have a guy in the building that has been a head coach and can help bring you along for some of those things that you may not have planned for whenever you became the head coach of an NFL team. Now, we're going to talk about the new offensive coordinator as well at Declan Doyle, but who better to ask about it than Ben Johnson himself? And I believe we actually have a clip about Ben Johnson talking about Declan Doyle. So let's go ahead and run that.
I ended up calling John Morton, who took the OC job at Detroit. He'd worked with Declan the last couple of years, and I asked him, I said, hey, how's Declan doing? Is he ready to be a coordinator? He said, Ben, listen, he's another Ben Johnson, which I think that's a good thing. I'm banking on that being a good thing. So, listen, I think he and I are a match made in heaven. He thinks very much like me. It's been awesome getting him into the building the last few weeks, and extremely detailed, extremely organized. The age does not matter. He is going to be respected by not only the players but also his fellow coaches as well.
So if I were hiring someone and I had to do some recon on it, and they said, well, listen, he's the next John Buffone, I don't know if I'm hiring him. but if it's Ben Johnson, I guess that's a good thing. But if I was hiring someone and they say he's just like you, I'm like, it ain't gonna work. But anyway, that's very high praise from Ben Johnson to Declan Doyle. We'll see how that chemistry works as the season progresses. Danny, I want to focus on some of the players now. Going into this season, what do you think was the most significant acquisition of the offseason, as in players that can help this team win right now?
Well, you guys know me. I'm a trenches guy, and solidifying that the interior, the middle of that offensive line for me was big. Right, start off with John Jackson from the Rams, getting him, and then going in and getting Joe Thuney, and then also then finishing off with signing Drew Dahlman in free agency from the Falcons. I think giving Caleb a pocket that even if his tackles are not up to par or are not Pro Bowl level, if you will, that outside pressure, I've always said this, when outside pressure comes, you can always step up for a quarterback. It's always easy to elude that pressure by stepping up in the pocket if you have a nice wall, a solid pocket in front of you formed to be able to step into. And I think that's exactly where Ben Johnson looked at as well. And the Bears went out and, again, solidified that interior of the offensive line. And I think those are going to be some of the benefits we'll see this season when that offense starts rolling, and we'll see Caleb eventually start picking it up and getting more and more confidence, stepping up into the pocket. We've already seen some of it, in the preseason. Obviously, it's small sample size, but we see Caleb a little bit more. That pocket, the middle of the pocket is still sturdy. Caleb stepping up a couple times there, maybe 1 or 2 hitches, and then getting rid of the football. So that, along with the fact that Johnson's going to have him, get the ball out of his hands quicker, I think we'll see a much lower number in terms of those overall sack numbers that he took last year, which was 68, I believe. So I think that should be at least cut in half if I had to guess right now.
And then, Alyssa, I'm going to pivot to you. What do you think was the most significant acquisition for this franchise's long-term health? Maybe not something that's going to be immediate injection this year, but something that's going to help them from years to come?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be Captain Obvious here, and I know we've already kind of discussed Ben Johnson, but I mean, he's like the obvious answer in terms of off-season acquisitions when talking about the long-term health here of this franchise, because the Bears believe he's the guy that's finally going to get it right, developing Caleb Williams, bringing stability to the head coaching position, an innovative offensive mind. He has all the tools, but I mean, elsewhere, I got to go, and I think that he can contribute right away, but I think overall long-term, I think he could be a substantial contributor down the line. And I got to go with my Michigan man, Colston Loveland, who I was so thrilled when they drafted him at 10th overall. I was a little shocked, but I was very happy. You know, he's a tight end, but he plays like a wide receiver. And watching him at Michigan, I've been impressed, especially when you look at the quarterbacks, or last year specifically, the lack of quarterback talent, he was still out there making plays and setting records. It was just really impressive. And even though he did miss the entire offseason program as he was recovering from shoulder surgery, he did really step right in there during the summer and just impressed right away. He earned Caleb's trust right away, which speaks volumes to me. And I feel like he has the potential to be that Sam Laporta for Ben Johnson for years to come. He has that combination of speed and size, that pass catching prowess. He's a solid blocker who's only going to get better. And I'm just really excited to see him and Cole Kmet on the field at the same time.
Yeah, and Danny, I'm going to give you the same question. Is there an acquisition, whether it's a draft pick or a free agent pickup, coaching? What do you think will be, what do you think was an acquisition that'll help this team in the long term?
You know, Aldo touched on in that video we saw earlier. It's this coaching staff. I absolutely love the assembling of this coaching staff, and we can go. We talked about Dennis Allen, the former head coach, a defensive coordinator now. I think he's going to bring that aggressive mentality that we want to see in a Bears defense. But let's go on beyond that, right? We talk about Al Harris, the cornerback coach that they pried away from Dallas. That was a huge get. I absolutely love that acquisition there of Al Harris. Antron Randall L., the receivers coach, small sample size, not a coincidence in my opinion, but guys, we saw Tyler Scott make more. I know he got cut, but we saw Tyler Scott make more plays in the preseason under the tutelage of Antron Randall L. than we saw him make the previous 2 seasons that we was here with the Bears. So I think the receiver core is going to continue to get better under the tutelage of Antron Randall L. Obviously, Dan Rochard, the offensive line coach, I like him a lot as well. And if you flip over to defense, we talked about Al Harris. There are veteran. There's also a lot of players here, former players something that he brought with him. Ben Johnson brought with him from Detroit, where a lot of ex-players are now involved. We talked about Al Harris, ex-player. He talked about obviously JT Barrett, the quarterback coach there, also a former player, Antron Randall. Also, I love the fact that he's bringing ex-players and he's incorporating him into this coaching staff. And I think this staff has the potential now to take young, talented players like a Colston Loveland, like a Luther Burden III, and now you're going to see him develop and get better as the years go on. I think that was a huge surprise, and also a pleasant surprise for me.
For me, it would probably be a guy who just changed his number today, I think, Luther Burden. And so I like that he's like, I'm wearing number 13. I like that they're looking towards the future because DJ Moore's not going to be here forever. I don't know if Luther Burden's going to be a 40, 50, 60 catch guy this year, but I think that he has the potential to be that tandem with Rome Odunze in year 2, 3, 4. And so I'm excited about that, to see how he progresses, to see how he fits in this offense, to see if that pays off, because that was a pretty high draft pick. There were a few concerns about him. So we'll see if they were able to work through that. But I guess it's time to kind of go through position by position. Let's start, Danny. I want to start with left tackle, because that has been a position that has been up in the air for the last few, we'll say, years. But it looks like Braxton's going to get settled down into that starting position. They drafted Ozzie Trapillo. We weren't sure about Karan Amagaji. What's your main concern about, or thoughts about, left tackle at this point?
Yeah, that's a really big spot there for the offensive line. That is a main concern right now. And again, Braxton Jones is the veteran coming off of a big, injury, broken ankle. And he was surprised that he was actually available early on in training camp as he was. So that to me was he was ahead of schedule, and that was good to see. But obviously you could see in some of the games, right, in the preseason games where, he's still not 100%. And, going into a season, especially that opening game, with Minnesota, that we know that they're an aggressive, defensive unit, a little bit Brian Flores, I think that's going to be something that he's going to be challenged there, and that's something that they keep an eye on, right? And now even Ben Johnson has said throughout the this training camp that they wanted someone to step up and take it. Like for me, I thought Isaac Tripolo had a chance to come in and claim that left tackle starting opportunity, but as Ryan Poles said in his press conference, there was a bit of a rookie wall he hit with all the changes that Isaac was going through it. So now they're going to reset him back at right, but he still has an opportunity in the future to be a left tackle for them. So we'll see how that goes. But looks like Braxton Jones is going to be there. But the one thing that does limit my concern or overall in terms of that position is we have a head coach now, a play caller that can scheme to help the left tackle, right? I don't foresee Braxton Jones one-on-one with a premier pass rusher coming off the edge. I think that he will protect him. He will see how things go there, transpire. Moving on to in future games. But if Braxton doesn't pick up his play, or if he's continuing to show that he's still not there in terms of recover from that injury, I think Ben Johnson has said we will not hesitate to put in somebody else there, whether it's Theo Benedict or if it's Isaac Tripolo or whoever, to kind of get that position settled. So concern, yes. But because of Ben Johnson and the way he's going to be able to scheme this and give him some protection, whether it's a chip from the running back or a tight end, or other ways to kind of help offset that limitation there that Braxton Jones might have, I think we'll be able to get by for the first 3-4 weeks, and then we'll see there. He keeps saying, Ben Johnson keeps saying that after the bye week, which is early this year, I think it's week 5, they're going to go ahead and kind of take a look and do some self scouting and see how everything's going. And if Braxton Jones is struggling on left tackle, that's where I can see them going in and making a change there if needed.
And another paid comment here from Maddie says, once they unlock Burden, watch out. I'm totally on board with that. We'll talk about him more when we get into the wide receivers, but thank you once again, Maddie. Alyssa, I want to talk about something that I don't know if has gotten a lot of, maybe I'm just not hearing it well, but the running back room is interesting with this team. They didn't make a splash in the draft like we thought they might. They didn't go out and they didn't sign any big free agents. So they're looking at they're looking at a room that is DeAndre Swift, Roschon Johnson, and Kyle Monangai, who was a 7th round pick. And so maybe that Ben Johnson sees his Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery in there somewhere in that room with DeAndre Swift and Roschon or Kyle Monangai. But what's your thought on this running back room? Because this is a team that I think would really want to run the ball to take the pressure off their young quarterback.
Yeah, I think looking at how the offseason transpired, especially in the draft, it was made abundantly clear that the Bears were looking to add a playmaking running back. We know that they wanted Ashton Genty. We know that they wanted to get Travion Henderson, which would have been amazing watching him in preseason, but it just didn't align, right? And they weren't able to land that guy. So I think that now you're talking about maybe Ben Johnson sees, his Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery and these players, but maybe he is forced to at this point, at least for a year, and he's going to be able to scheme some things. And, hopefully he knows DeAndre Swift well from his time with him in Detroit. So we'll see. And I think from the very limited action that we've seen from Kyle Monangai before, he got injured, I think that he has the opportunity to push Roschon Johnson for that second running back spot fairly quickly. So we'll see how that transpires. And Travis Homer on short-term IR right now, and he's going to be their key special teams guy and that core depth guy. But the biggest concern though at this point is that there is one healthy running back on the roster, and the Bears have a game in less than 2 weeks. So, hope we'll see how that goes. But it's just having DeAndre. But the fact that no one ended up on IR outside of Travis Homer, we'll see how the injuries transpire. But right now it is a little concerning, especially because Ben Johnson wants to run the ball. The Bears are going to need to run the ball. They want to use that play action to open things up for Caleb. They want to take pressure off of him. So we'll see how this transpires. But I think that next offseason we're going to see the Bears look to upgrade that running back room.
I'm already scouting running backs, guys. Don't worry about it.
I assume that you were. One position that I think is going to be a position of strength would be those wide receivers that we were talking about earlier. Danny, with a room that has DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Luther Burden, Zacchaeus, they keep Jade Walker on the active roster. How much is it? Well, when we started this show, we were talking about, some of these wide receiving cores that were not great. I think Kendall Wright was the leading receiver one year that whenever we were doing this show. And then listen, I'm not even going to go through all those receivers, but at any rate, Danny, what is your overall view on this wide receiving room?
Yeah, not to bring back the past, but one year Dante Pettis was the number one receiver, and he's like a punt returner on the Saints now. So, but anyway, I digress. But yeah, I mean, this room is the most talented that I can recall in a long time for the Bears. And you talked about some of the names there with DJ Moore and Rome Odunze and Zacchaeus. I think Zacchaeus is going to have a huge impact, especially in the slot. If training camp and some of the practices we saw have any indication, this guy's going to have a big season running, being that security blanket, if you will, for Caleb from the slot. And Luther Burden is a guy that's only going to get better. And already we've seen, again, I go back to Antron Randall L. He wanted Luther Burden. And then with all the questions, John, you kind of mentioned that there in the opening, there are some questions in terms of Luther Burden's, passion for the game and all that stuff, and what he does with the ball when it's not coming to him, in terms of his effort and all that stuff. So, but we saw blocking. We saw him in terms of, being a third down threat. We saw him making catches and making that his specialty, which is run after the catch. So I think this is a guy that's got tremendous potential. And again, Ben Johnson's going to be able to get him the opportunity or give him the opportunity to make plays in the open field. And that's the one thing where, even going back to the running back real quick, DeAndre Swift, Ben Johnson, and this is something I was surprised by. He's a huge DeAndre Swift fan. And not just because he's the only healthy running back on his roster currently, but he's always talked up DeAndre Swift when he got here. He talks about some of the explosiveness that he had, and talked about, even with Eric Bieniemy, the running back coach, again, another, great hire there, another former player. He's going to demand DeAndre Swift, stay on track in terms of run the ball where it's designed. So I think, and he talked about getting him in the open space and making plays with the ball in his hands. So I think there's ways he's going to scheme not only the receivers, but the running backs and also the tight ends in this offense. And I think we'll see some creativity. Again, as long as that offensive line holds up and gives Caleb some time and gives Ben Johnson the opportunity to get creative, we will see that as the season goes on.
And Danny, you didn't get to weigh in too much on the running back, so I want to bring up this question that Maddie brought up in the chat room. It says, does the injuries in the running back room and the secondary, when we'll get to the secondary here in a little bit, but let's just start with the running backs room. Do those injuries have you feeling any sort of way? Because we're like Alyssa said, we're getting up to it now. We're at the threshold.
Yeah. I'm concerned about the depth. I am concerned about depth in the running back room. I am shocked and surprised, that they didn't claim or bring in a running back that was cut, or even, try and go and acquire someone. So I don't know if they have any future plans or whatnot. And I know there's only 3 right now, and both Roshan Johnson and Kyle Monangai are currently injured. But I think Monangai is trending the right way. He should be ready to go hopefully by next Monday night. But guys, don't sleep on Kyle Monangai. I know he's a 7th round pick and he's out of Rutgers. This is a productive back coming out of the Big Ten, back-to-back 1,200-yard seasons, double-digit touchdown rushing, did not fumble at all in his collegiate career. He's not going to be the Jahmyr Gibbs kind of highlight reel guy. He's not going to bust 70, 40, 50-yard runs, but he's going to give you that vision, the cutback ability, the contact power, the contact balance to be able to break tackles, and always, he's always leaning forward. The first guy rarely brings him down. So, some of that downhill, tough running, Monangai will give you that, right? So I think he's a guy that once he gets healthy, we will see that. And I think that's be a nice compliment to DeAndre Swift moving forward. So, but the injury concern is something that we have to kind of, think about here, and the depth. Roshan Johnson has never been healthy throughout his career, and other than last year when he made him a short yardage goal line back, hasn't really seen much success throughout his Bear tenure as well. So, he was a guy I was surprised actually made the final cut over some of the other guys that they had in camp. But he's there on the roster right now, and we'll see what happens. Now, Britton Brown was a guy that they signed literally August 11th, 2 days before Aldo and I were there at training camp, and he did nothing but impress, whether it's the practices and the preseason games. Now he's back on the practice squad, so he's still there if needed. That they always call him up on game day. But yeah, the depth in the running back room has me a little bit worried here, especially if you go into a game with only 3 running backs, healthy running backs. If they're all healthy, that's something that concerns me a little bit.
Yeah, and we'll see how that health progresses as we get closer to week 1. Alyssa, I specifically held this position for you, the tight ends, because you get to talk about your boy from Michigan. Let's talk about that tight end room. How confident are you in the depth that they have at tight end? Because now they have Loveland, Cole Kmet, Durham Smythe is there. How do you feel about the tight ends heading into 2025?
Yeah, I mean, for so long, the Bears have been looking to get like that perfect second tight end. Gerald Everett didn't work out, So I feel like now you have this duo of Colston Loveland and Cole Kmet, where Ben Johnson, he is going to have so much fun. I feel like it's going to be an absolute matchup nightmare for opposing defenses. And I mean, I feel like with Colston, we'll see how quickly, but I feel like he could potentially pass up Cole in terms of targets. As a receiver, I think we can see Cole more as a blocker. We'll see, but I'm excited to see how Ben utilizes both of them on the field at the same time. It's even more weapons for Caleb Williams. I mean, I feel like at this point there's one ball and there's a lot of weapons for him to choose between. And I feel like this is overall, Danny was talking about how this is the best receiver room that, we've seen in a very long time. And I think overall, this is the best core of weapons we've seen, perhaps maybe outside of running back, that the Bears have had in quite some time. And I think that I'm just really excited to see Colston in action with a quarterback throwing to him. I mean, I don't want to say an actual, because J.J. McCarthy was a good quarterback, and the Bears are going to see him in week 1. But I'm excited to see what Colston Loveland can do with an offensive genius like Ben Johnson and Cole Kmet as well. And I'm just, I'm excited to see both of them on the field at the same time using that 12 personnel. And I think that they're going to give defenses fits.
So you weren't happy with Robert Tonyan or Jesper
Robert
Horsted?
Tonyan. I know I forgot to say Tonyan.
Yeah, I was a big Jesper Horsted guy, so there will be no slander of Jesper Horsted on this show. Let's talk about the quarterbacks, Danny. I held this position specifically for you because now that quarterback room has Caleb Williams, it has a newly extended Tyson Bagent, and it has the wily veteran Case Keenum. How important do you think it was to keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster, 2 young, 1 with a lot of experience?
I was actually shocked, John. And Aldo and I had this conversation when we went to practice. I thought they were going to go with 2 because I figured they needed the extra roster spot for another position. But, they went with 3. And Ben Johnson came out and said that they went with because of the fact they like in terms of what Case Keenum gives in that room, that veteran, wily veteran back there to kind of listen and be on the sounding board, another coach, if you will, for Caleb Williams and Tyson Bagent. But the one thing that became evident throughout this training camp, and obviously with the contract extension, is Ben Johnson really likes Tyson Bagent. Ben Johnson really believes in Tyson Bagent. Ben Johnson actually came out and said that he sees Tyson Bagent being a starter in this league, and I think that was curious to me. And then not that he gave kudos or flowers towards Tyson Bagent, but the fact that it's evident that there's something there with Bagent and Johnson, and I think Johnson even mentioned that they're kind of cut from the same cloth, if you will. They kind of think the same way and love football the same way. So, and again, this is me not spewing or trying to start anything, but I'm just saying, like, if things don't work out I'm not saying they're not going to. I'm saying if Tyson Bagent is an actual option, in my opinion, for Ben Johnson to be eventually be a starter in this league, whether it's for the Bears or somebody else. I'm just saying that to me came out with not only the extension but just the praise that he gave him. But in terms of Caleb, obviously Ben Johnson took this job because of Caleb Williams. Alyssa alluded to earlier, he had opportunities in previous years and he turned it down. He really wanted this Bears job. And one of the reasons he really wanted it was because of Caleb Williams. So I think Caleb Williams is in the best hands that he's been in probably throughout his career in terms of someone that's going to help him develop and be able to play the NFL game and quarterback it, and from the proper way, right? Ben Johnson is going to highlight in terms of his footwork, in terms of his ability from the pocket, but he's not going to take away or limit his ability to get out of the pocket, right? That first or second preseason game, the one that we first saw the starters play against the Bills. First play, what was it? It was play action, rolling out, Caleb rolling out, hitting close and 11 for an easy, pitch and catch there, 7-8 yard gain, first down, right? Second and 2. Those are the kind of things that Ben Johnson is going to do to help Caleb get better and progress in his career. So I think we talked about the receiver room and the tight end room being some of the best in terms of talent. I think this quarterback room is the most confident I've been in this. I can't remember last time, to be honest with you, that in terms of if God forbid Caleb goes down, has missed a game or whatever, I think the Bears can win games with Tyson and or Case Keenum. I think that's how confident I am with this in this quarterback room. So we'll see how it plays out.
Not even week 1, we're talking about Tyson Bagent. No, I'm kidding.
I'm kidding.
I know. I don't want to throw any more kerosene on that fire. Danny, I'm going to stick with you because I want to switch sides of the ball. I want to talk about the pass rush because for me, this would be the biggest concern going into the season. Austin Booker being put on short-term IR. And honestly, I didn't see, and I know I'm not trying to put too much stock into preseason, but Dayo Odeyingbo didn't look great in some of his reps throughout the preseason. He was going up against a rookie tackle against the Chiefs, and it looks like he basically lost every one-on-one that he had with that kid. He looked slow getting off the snap. With Booker on short-term IR, it makes you wonder, are they going to do who'd they trade for last year? His first name was Daryl. I can't think of his last name. Taylor. Who had one great game and then didn't and kind of faded. The year before they go out and they get Yannick Ngakoue. Are they gonna repeat history this year and go out and get Jadeveon Clowney or Zadarius Smith, both of which will be 32 years of age going into the season, and we're less than 2 weeks away from the season. And so I don't know if they're going to go out and get some help just for specialty pass rushing. What are your thoughts on the pass rush here with this team?
Yeah, I'm concerned. And you talked about it in terms of, Dayo Odeyingbo, like even at the practices that we went to, like he wasn't really doing much in terms of generating pressure in the practices, in the scrimmages, right? And obviously you saw in the preseason. Now, the one carrot I will say is Dennis Allen wasn't scheming pressure. And that's where maybe we'll get into Dennis Allen later on and what he does in terms of scheming pressure. But it was just playing, pretty much vanilla stuff for the most part, right? So I think that's the only thing that I'm holding out hope for. But yeah, if Montez Sweat, we need that 10 to 12 sack season for Montez Sweat, and then obviously, hopefully, some of the other young guys develop. Now, Austin Booker going on short-term IR is a big blow. You mentioned going out and getting somebody. I don't know. Could they? Sure. It's a little late in the game, I think, right, to go get Zadarius Smith off the couch. And again, he's not really a elite pass rush. He's more another guy that just a power rusher guy that's does a lot of what it does, uses his length and some of that core strength to be able to get tackles on her heels and into the quarterback's lap. So in terms of that speed edge rusher, we don't see anything out on the horizon unless there's some sort of surprise trade that none of us expect to happen. But that is a concern, and we'll see what happens in the season. But they didn't. Dayo was their big investment in terms of the defensive edge position. They didn't do anything in terms of the draft really and bringing anybody in, and so they're kind of basing it all off of what Dennis Allen can do here in terms of scheme and generating pressure, and then hopefully their secondary, which is one of their strengths of the defense, getting physical and being able to kind of slow down the receivers in their routes and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I'm trying to chalk this up to, like you said, it's vanilla defense in the preseason. You're just trying to get the reps and get into football shape. So we're hoping that that's different in the regular season. Dennis Allen gets a little more exotic with the blitz packages. I'm not writing off anybody as far for preseason. That would be right. That would be foolhardy. But Alyssa, what are your thoughts on the pass rush?
Yeah, no, like Danny said, I'm concerned because when you look at it, this is another area that has been a need for a while. And yes, Ryan Poles did go out and got Montez Sweat, but we've been looking for his complement for some time. And as wasn't encouraged from what I saw from Dayo, as he was a non-factor in the preseason. Danny talking about how he was there in person watching practices and saw the same thing. But again, trying not to look too much into that at this point of the preseason. I think the loss of Austin Booker, at least 4 games, is is big, because when you look at the guys on the roster behind him who are going to be those rotational guys off the edge, Dominique Robinson and Daniel Hardy, can you really rely on them to be that? I mean, are they going to go out and add someone? Like we are a couple weeks, less than 2 weeks away from a game, but we'll see. But it has been a pattern for Ryan Poles, or we'll see if he's going to roll with these guys. But they're going to need some help from the interior defensive line to bring that pass rush.
Speaking of, let's run through that real quickly, Danny. How do you feel about the interior defensive line? Obviously, did a lot of re-equipping there, and some guys looking to take the next step this year.
Yeah, big year for Gervon Dexter. I think this is the year where he has got to either put up or shut up. I mean, he's another second round pick of Ryan Poles that last year I thought early on was coming on, and I set him up in front of our eyes, and all of a sudden he just went cold for the rest of the season. So obviously bringing in a veteran like Grady Jarrett will kind of help, but I think he's a guy that's 32 years old. Last year had a solid season coming off an injury. He should be a little bit better there. But also a guy that I want to, hopefully that Bears have a plan where they kind of limit in terms of how much they use him there. Andrew Billings is a guy that's a play hard, try hard, run stuffer. They got rid of their Zach Pickens and obviously Shamar Turner, the second round pick. He's been hurt for most of the training camp. Haven't really seen him. So there are some things there in the inside where we're going to have to kind of see some of these guys develop. And for me, it's Gervon Dexter. He's going to have to take that next step up and become the player that the Bears thought they were getting when they invested a second round pick in him. So the defensive line, there's a lot of questions there for me. So that's something that that KC game was really bad. I mean, and again, I pressed by saying that there was no scheming or anything like that. It was just kind of vanilla defense, but Mahomes really had any pressure on him, and when he did have pressure, he was able to easily escape the pressure and make plays on the football field. And I just hope that's not something that we're going to see moving on as the season starts.
Yeah, I'm excited about the defensive line. I'm excited to see what Dexter can do, and you bring Jarrett in. I think that they can get a lot of pressure up the middle and hopefully make it easier on somebody who's on the edges to come in and make some plays. But Alyssa, let's talk about the linebackers, because this is an interesting group, and you don't really know how often they're going to be in their base 4-3. They're probably going to spend a lot of time in nickel. But what are your thoughts on the current slew of linebackers that the Bears are sporting?
Yeah, Bears are bringing back Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards for year 3, and TJ just earned that contract extension this offseason to stick around for an extra couple of years. And he's been solid, since coming to Chicago, but Edmonds has more to prove. And I think this is a big prove it year for him. And Dennis Allen was talking a lot about, he was talking about moving them around between Mike and Will, and we'll see where they ultimately end up sticking when the regular season kicks off, if they'll be rotating perhaps, on a game to game or a play by play basis. But I think the biggest update, I guess, would be that third linebacker spot, where after Jack Sanborn departed to join Matt Eberflus down in Dallas, Eberflus loves his guys. But Noah Sewell has really taken a big step. He's someone who there's been a lot of people have been singing his praises this offseason and how he's really developed. And he easily won that third linebacker job over rookie Ruben Hippolyte. But Hippolyte has been, no slouch either. He's been impressing in the preseason, and he was the one, I think, the biggest questionable draft pick. People had, some of the draft scouts had him going undrafted or in the 7th round, and the Bears stood firm and took him there in the 4th round. So they clearly had big plans for him. But I think, this is going to be a big year for Tremaine Edmonds. When you have cap hit that high, you're going to need to prove yourself. So, and Noah Sewell, he's going to be there waiting in the wings just in case.
Absolutely. And I want to revert back to that question that Maddie asked earlier about the running back room, and then also asked about the defensive backs. I want to switch to the secondary now, Danny. With that, how confident are you in that secondary, and do any of the, injuries give you concern or give you reason for pause?
Yeah, I was going to say right before that, you said the injuries, if all healthy, I'm very, very, very happy with this defensive secondary, right? Jalen Johnson out there, and obviously, Kyler Gordon healthy, and Jaquan Brisker. I know he left practice yesterday with the trainer. There was no word. I haven't heard anything in terms of if it's serious or what happened there with Brisker. But I think if that unit is healthy, I think that's is probably the strength of the defense, to be honest with you, right? And I think, getting to Dennis Allen real quick, he always, when he talk about pressure, he talked about some of the stuff he does up front with the defensive lineman, whether it's the stunts, in all the games he plays with his forefront guys, but he also relies heavily on his cornerbacks, right? The corners come up there, press, be physical with the receiver, jam, press him at the line of scrimmage, throw off the timing of the offense, throw off the timing of the routes there. And I think that's where he's going to kind of rely heavily on that secondary to help generate some of that pass rush. So, with Jalen Johnson, it's up in the air whether he's going to be playing against Minnesota or not. Obviously now with Kyler Gordon, it seems like he's always dealing with some sort of soft tissue injury. But if those guys are healthy and on the football field, I think this could be potentially the strongest part or strongest unit of the Bears defense.
Yeah, and so like you said, health. I mean, the NFL in general is a game of attrition. How most of the time the teams that are in the Super Bowl are the ones that stay the healthiest, and so we'll see how healthy they stay. Wait, we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, we got more Buffone 55 and a new segment we're gonna unveil. So stick around. We'll be back in about 60 seconds.
He talked about how, in his own colorful way, he had very special language that I won't say here on a family podcast.
We don't
worry, I talk like that on here. So.
Yeah, we don't always adhere to that rule.
He said it's a good thing that I ended up with this disease and none of you sons of a guns because none of you could have handled it. And of course that was typical Steve, and they all laughed, and then next thing you know, they were kind of shedding a tear. So that's kind of how I ended the story. It was pure McMichael and a way that he touched a few of his teammates one more time.
Welcome back to Buffone 55. Okay, as John said at the start of the show, this show is his tribute to his uncle, John Buffone, considered one of the greatest players to play for the Chicago Bears. Over the last 8 seasons, John paid tribute to Doug by answering questions that I posed in 55 seconds. He was quite good at it. This season, we're going to pay tribute with 2 different segments. In each segment, Doug himself will help pose the question, and John and Danny will respond. Okay, guys, you ready for this?
Listen, we got rid of the clock part because I'm getting old and I just can't talk that fast anymore. Like when we started this show, I was still in my 20s, and now I just I'm a wily vet, and I have to take let's just call this load management. I just can't do it anymore, so we got to do this. We got to do it. We got to do something different.
See, you weren't doing that endurance training during the off season.
Yeah.
Okay, question number 1, fellas. Ryan Poles has not had any success so far, at least with his 3rd-round picks. Bayless Jones in 2022, an unmitigated disaster. Zach Pickens in 2023 has more letter C's in his first name than he has career sacks. That's true, just 1.5. And while the jury is still deliberating on Yale grad Karan Amagaji, members of the jury appear to not be fans of Ivy Leaguers. So, as Doug would ask,
you tell me what's going on. What the hell is going on?
Okay, John, start us off.
Well, maybe they understood their deficiencies with not being able to pick in the 3rd round, which is why they didn't have one this year. There's like, you know what, we're staying away from the 3rd round. We're not going to do it. But look, it's been rough in the 3rd round. When Bayless Jones came out, there was a lot of questions about is he too old? Is he going to be able to assimilate into the in the NFL game? But people were saying, hey, he's going to be this Swiss Army knife. He's going to be like Deebo Samuel. He's going to be in the backfield. He's going to be a receiver. He's going to be a return specialist, until we realized that he couldn't handle kicks. And then the receiver thing didn't work out. And then they tried a last-ditch effort at running back, and that didn't work. So clearly that was a very disappointing pick. I had high hopes for Zach Pickens. Just didn't seem to work out. Like you said, 1.5 sacks in 2 years. He's now on the Kansas City practice squad, which it'll be the most Chiefs thing ever if he turns into like a Pro Bowler being in their system. And anyone's still wondering, yes, Bayless Jones is still playing. I believe he's on the Saints roster. And then talking about Amagaji, listen, that same questions. He had injuries coming out of college. He's coming out of the Ivy League. Can his game translate into the NFL? And we just haven't seen enough yet. He hasn't been able to get enough reps on the field as far as I'm concerned. And so I think the Bears tipped their hand by overhauling the offensive line and then drafting Ozzie Trapillo. So I think that they're thinking this could be going sour at some point, or if he just can't get on the field. So yeah, third round, stay away from it. Just trade it every year as far as I'm concerned. Just that's not your sweet spot anymore. Just trade it away. Danny, what do you got?
No, I agree with you, John. It's been a disaster, and they did the right thing. They traded out of the third round, moved up, got an extra second round pick, and made 3 second round picks. So yeah, it's unfortunate. Obviously, the Bayless Jones thing was a gamble. I think was a high gamble because third round picks, guys, are still guys that I expect to come in and contribute. May not be starters, but should be rotational guys, or should be guys that can contribute in year one. Teams like Ryan Poles just takes flyers on some of these players that he's been drafting. And now Pickens was a guy that I'll be honest here. I was high on that guy. I think he was a guy that for that scheme with the Eberflus scheme, I think he was a good 3 technique prospect. He didn't pan out, injuries or attitude, whatever it was. But unfortunately, again, that didn't work out. Now, Karan, I know he's getting hammered from what happened last year in that brief episode or brief appearance, I should say, versus the Vikings. But that's not fair for that kid. Kid's coming off an injury, hasn't really done much in terms of practicing and no OTAs or anything like that, and he gets thrown out in one of the more hostile environments against one of the more physical and aggressive defensive fronts in the NFL, and he looks bad. And he looked horrible. Now, the only thing that was curious for me is looks like they're now kind of transitioning him to inside the guard. Ryan Poles in his press conference last week said that he's going to be kind of rotating between left or right guard, kind of maybe being a backup swing guard, interior player there. So that kind of tells me maybe they have given up, or this staff has given up on him being a tackle. So we'll see. But yeah, unfortunately, it hasn't panned out. And even if you go back to the 2023 draft, a lot of those picks have really not even on the roster right now. So, we'll see how Gervon Dexter is a huge year for him to kind of make a break here with that second round pick too. So yeah, unfortunately, third round hasn't worked out. I'm not totally giving up on Karan Amagaji. We'll see how that goes. But so far it's been a bad experience with those third round picks.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm not ready to give up on Amagaji just yet. Even when he was in that left tackle battle and then he suffered that injury and Theo Benedict just kind of swooped right in and surpassed him up there on the depth chart. But it sounds like Ryan Poles is trying to find a spot for him on the roster, kicking him inside to guard, using him as a swing guard. We'll see how that works out. But yeah, it was unfair to judge him just for last year when he was thrown to the wolves essentially in that game, and that happened. But looking at Bayless and looking at Zach, and hopefully it's not Amagaji, because I feel like, what's the saying, like the first one's a mistake, the second's a coincidence, the third it's a pattern. So let's hope that we don't get to that point.
Yes.
Okay, so number 2, fellas. During the preseason finale against the Chiefs, the Bears pass rush was, in a word, ineffective. Or to put it as Doug would say, you are a professional football team. Act like one, for crying out loud. I'm trying not to scream. It's 10 o'clock at night here. Danny, as you know, Dennis Allen is not one to blitz often. In his last 2 seasons, Allen's Saints defenses had the 2nd lowest in the league. So how are the Bears going to put pressure on the quarterback? Or, as Doug would say,
you got to do something about it. In other words, what are you going to do about it?
Well, touched on a little bit earlier in our previous segment there, Alyssa, Dennis Allen, what he relies on, he does a lot of, in terms of disguising his coverages, tries to confuse the quarterback at the line of scrimmage, and then uses stunts in games up front with his defensive lineman, whether it's a tackle and, a twist or a stunt or not, to free up his defensive pass rushers to get after the quarterback. And then again, uses his corners, his secondary players to be able to be physical, to be able to bump and alter the timing and throw off the timing of the route of a receiver, and also allows and actually relies on his linebackers to be physical in terms of there's a crossing route that goes in front of into the linebackers zone to be able to nudge. Obviously, you got to be within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage to be able to nudge and throw that receiver, be physical with that crossing route, and make sure that timing is thrown off. So it's a defense that kind of relies on all the moving parts there. But in terms of first level defensive front, a lot of stunts, a lot of games up front there. And then obviously then the second and third level got to get physical with those route runners and be able to kind of throw off the timing of the quarterback, of the offense, of the play or whatnot, and just kind of reroute players there. So I think that's where he kind of uses, and again talked about it, pre-snap, trying to confuse the corner, or I'm sorry, the quarterback, and not kind of disguise coverages, not sure are they in zone, are they in man, are they going to bring pressure, are they not bringing pressure? That's the kind of mind game he plays pre-snap, and then obviously we talked about other units kind of working all together there.
Yeah, and I don't really have a big X and O response to this, but what I will say is let's not just repeat history where we've seen some of these Bears defenses doing the same thing over and over again, not getting any pressure on the quarterback, but just staying in that defense and just saying, let's just keep doing this. Let's just keep doing this. And it's just so frustrating to watch whenever you're not getting pressure with that front four. Do something different. I'd rather go out on my shield and say, you know what, we got some guys that can blitz. If we need to get pressure on the quarterback, yeah, we might get burned, but at least we're not going to, die by 1,000 little cuts. We're going to go after the quarterback. You got guys that can blitz. You can bring Brisker into blitz if you wanted to. You can change things up and give different looks. So I don't know how effective the front four will be. I hope it will be effective. I hope they can get pressure with the front four, but if they can't, just please don't keep beating your head off the wall and expect different results. I hope that, and I think Dennis Allen is a guy that will adjust to the game flow and what's going on and make those adjustments on defense to make sure that they're not doing the same thing over and over again if it's ineffective. But, well, it looks like that's going to wrap up our debut episode of season 9 here on Buffone 55. Guys, we made it through. Before we do the outro, I'm going to go around the horn real quick. Danny, what are you working on? Like you said, it's always draft season. What do you got going on right now?
Yeah, I'm already watching Nebraska here for Cincinnati. Got a game going on here. Obviously, college football started, guys. This is a huge week for college football. Some big games this weekend. Obviously, the big headline there is with Texas playing there versus Clemson. So I think that's going to be a huge game. Obviously, then we have Notre Dame versus Miami playing there as well. A ton of slate here in terms of college football. And then obviously we'll go into the season. The NFL season started next weekend, and Bears kick off. And on my YouTube page at Shimon Draft Scout, I've already got the edges there, edge players that I've kind of earmarked here for the upcoming season, guys that right now are top 5, and then we'll see how the transpires in terms of the rest of the season. Obviously, the running backs there as well. I talked about earlier. I've already started scouting running backs. We're looking at running backs for next year's class. Look at some of these players. We'll have something up there within this weekend here about defensive tackles there as well. So I'm targeting areas that would need that right now. As I look at the Bears team, that they have some holes there, and it could use some reinforcement. So we'll continue that as a college season goes on, and obviously, as I mentioned earlier, once the season starts rolling, we'll break down some Bears tapes there, whether it's some rookies, whether it's some Caleb, so whatnot, and we'll post that also on Shimon Draft Scout.
Excellent stuff. Alyssa, still 5, 7, 15 articles a day. What do we got going on over there?
Yes. Well, with roster cutdowns, yes, it was quite a doozy. But I'm excited to kick off over at Bears Wire. We have a game. Next week is game week, so we're going to get back into the groove of things, and also going to unveil my game by game predictions right before the season. I always do one like right after the schedule release when we have absolutely no idea. And now I'm going to make my game picks, so that's something I'm going to be working on. So check that out. And yeah, just stay tuned to Bears Wire. We're going to have all of our pregame. We're going to have a live blog during the game, and all of our post game content, up to date news, injuries. We got it all at Bears Wire.
Excellent. And, Danny, I know it's always draft season, but I'm just hoping that we're not doing mock drafts in October like we sometimes do on this show. So, I mean, I know that you get excited to do that, but if we can hold that off until like the later part of the season or even after the season, I would feel great that we could actually watch some meaningful football. But with that, just a quick programming note. Next week, we will be on Tuesday night, which will be our regular night throughout the season. Buffone 55 will be on every Tuesday. And in next week's show, this is a fan favorite, or maybe it's just our favorite, we will be doing our annual predictions for the season. Hey, you guys remember how well we did last year?
I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. No idea.
Yeah, I'm preparing this year. I'm preparing. I'm not going to let emotion take the best of me and have you guys kind of talk me into a win here when I'd have a loss originally set on that. I'm gonna be prepared. I'm gonna stick to my board. I'm not gonna deviate from my board. And we're gonna have a
no
solid,
peer pressure.
I have been hilariously bad at this, like insanely bad at this, where I've taken like the homer stance on everything, and I've talked myself into wins that should not be wins, and I'm like, oh, they're gonna do that, they're gonna win. Oh yeah, they're gonna be 11, they're gonna be 11-6 easily. And so I think that at one point I had them at like 11 wins, and that was during that like whatever game losing streak they were on, and I was like, yeah, let's go ahead and burn that tape, because that did not work out well for any of us. But
I blame you, John. I blame you, because I go in saying, hey, 6-7 wins, and next thing you know, they're 12-5 or whatever they come out.
I'm telling you, the positivity can be infectious. I never used to be this. You know how most people get like, as they get like, they turn into a curmudgeon and negative folks as they get older. I'm turning more and more positive as I'm getting older. And I guess that's a good thing, but not when you're predicting the Bears schedule, because it makes you a lot less likely to.
This is moronic.
So like, you're right. So we're gonna have some fun next week. We're gonna go game by game. Maybe Aldo will have that fun spaceship graphic that we always have that spotlights which ones are primetime games and stuff like. Oh, there we go. All right, we're gonna go through game by game. We're gonna make our predictions on what the Bears are gonna do in the 2025 season. So you're not gonna want to miss that one. But that will do it for this edition of Buffone 55. For Alyssa Barbieri and Danny Shimon and the Podfather Aldo Gandia working all the controls in the back, we appreciate him. My name is John Buffone. Welcome back to Buffone 55. We'll see you next week.